Well, you've got two choices. Before all the fair things are claimed. Two choices, justice treats them the same. Let me tell you about your first lady. She's sweet and kind, hints at goodness like a proper lady should, and makes you want to. You really want to let her go. Ho ho ho, you want her so. And we'll hear everything we can to let her go. Well, you've got two choices. Before all the fair things are claimed. Two choices, justice treats them the same. Let me tell you about your second lady. She promises trouble. Makes you glad, makes you cry. But still you can't deny. You want her. You really, really want to give in. Ho ho ho, you want her so. And we'll hear everything we can to make it so. Well, you've got two choices. Before all the fair things are claimed. Two choices, justice treats them the same. Two choices before all the fair things are claimed. The judge walked to his desk and sat down, the orcs returning to their posts. The sober tone of the song invited no audience participation. When it ended, no applause followed, barely any visible reaction at all. Behind the defendant's table, Maud nudged Kieran's side. Receiving no response, her target was distractedly smiling at a flustered juror who reminded him of his mother's spiced bread. The witch elbowed him again. Startled from his reverie, Kieran felt the ache in his side. Almost balking, he recalled his commitment to the plan and steeled himself. Internally chanting, don't think, a mantra that had served him well in many battles, he reached up to undo the buttons holding his cape closed. With the second button undone, he smoothly rose from his chair in a way only someone as comfortable in the air as on the ground could. Then with a graceful swoosh, he removed the cape and draped it over his seat, bending just enough to ensure every juror noticed the ruffled white underskirts beneath. Take it off, shop fairy. Take it all off. Fergus, what have I told you about shouting in my court? Judge Blackhall barked, glaring over Kieran's head. Don't do it, a quieter voice said. Correct. Or Jennifer won't let you take her to the next dance. And you, young lady, do you have a problem? Not quite shrinking back, and careful not to expose his undershorts, Kieran asked, I was warm? Hopefully you don't get cold in your lovely new dress. Isn't the defendant's dress pretty, Advocate Del Veris? It is, Your Honor, Del Veris replied, a faint smile at the defense's antics. Definitely a pair of beauties we have here. Though I hope the jury will still pay attention to the witness box, Blackhall added, half chiding. The jury, faced with an empty witness box, decided to ignore it. Some watched the Duchess, whose eyes gleamed with competitive, seductive appeal, while others silently wished for a breeze to clear away the clouds of Bigsy underskirts. Trial by. If everyone's comfortable, good. Let's begin the morning session. Advocate, please call your next witness. Before Del Veris could respond, another voice rang out from the audience. Your Honor, before the esteemed counsel from where proceeds, I must raise a matter of precedence. This announcement marked the arrival of a tall woman who confidently strode between the opposing tables to stand before the judge, trailed by a harried youth. The judge, wearing a grin of appreciation, appeared less surprised by the interruption than anyone else. Solicitor Isabella, to what do we owe your presence? Judge Blackhall, always a pleasure, the solicitor said. In that moment, a question that had puzzled Kieran cleared. The interruption had not been from a baritone voice, but definitely a man's. Though the youth's voice was timid and not bold enough to interrupt, when the solicitor spoke again, the confident voice confirmed Kieran's suspicion. He was seeing a man. Yet appearances remained ambiguous. Solicitor Isabella's face bore fine bone structure, red lips, bright green eyes, and a delicate nose. More pretty than handsome, made all the more striking by a gleam of confidence, not arrogance, but self-assuredness. Kieran noticed Isabella's robe was a stylized uniform resembling both the judge's and the Duchess's attire. The robe flowed to reveal a slender form like a willont's, and his wig was little different from Kieran's own loose ponytail. Messer Isabella is one of my best customers, Maud whispered to Kieran. We'll be stopping at his manor after we leave Fairtown. Overhearing, the solicitor smiled. I await eagerly, seamstress Thorn. But now I cannot be distracted by pleasant thoughts while representing my family in this important matter. Yes, please tell us why you interrupt this court, Advocate Del Veris said, his voice edged with irritation. I represent the vineyards of Xavier Isabella. We know the name, they supply the Duchess's favorite wines. But I am puzzled what role they play in today's case. If you'll allow me, Advocate Del Veris, I'll provide an answer. Receiving a nod, Solicitor Isabella continued. Though not figuratively, I arrive here with 4 wagons, more precisely, the contents of those wagons and the man who led their train. Each wagon carried 4 casks of Isabella's finest, Chateau de Belle. These wagons were destined for the ducal palace in Angerie, under the command of one Simon Unkler. Somewhat stirred from her distraction, Duchess Morgana asked, "Do you mean the very one Simon gifted me when he proposed?" "The very same, Your Grace. Though such a gift barely begins to offer you proper homage, those casks were not his to give. He did not own them. Rather, he worked for the vineyards and was meant to sell them at the best possible price." Neither flirtation nor distraction softened the Duchess's eyes as she replied, "He worked for Isabella's?" He introduced himself as Simon Unkler, Duke Plicity, a noble from beyond the bridge. Kieran stifled a laugh, fearing the wrath of an angry Duchess more than the sanctity of the court. Since seeing her the day before, he'd wondered how the former quartermaster became her betrothed. To learn Unkler did so under a persona born of campfire jest among the regiment earned Kieran a grudging admiration mixed with anger. He scribbled a note to Adrian, proposing a question for another witness on Del Veris's list, one he now dreaded less. Unaware of the thoughts swirling in the defendant's mind, Isabella answered the Duchess, "Great is the man's talent for lying, lies that have ensnared all before this rail of judgment, whether employer, friend, or lover. Though whether that belongs before the court, I cannot say. That makes your matter of precedence even more puzzling, Solicitor Isabella," Advocate Del Veris said, calming his client with a hand on the forearm. "For a matter fitting for the courts, the theft of 16 casks of wine. But fear not, we lay no blame on the Duchy of Wer. Simon Unkler alone bears responsibility for this crime. And now it seems a Simon Unkler may soon face justice, depending on this court's ruling." A new worry bloomed in Kieran's mind. He glanced nervously at Adrian, but before the Ashent could protest, an unexpected party stood, though not for their sake. Del Veris said, "Your Honor, if I understand Solicitor Isabella's argument correctly, it puts me in an impossible position. If I pursue my case fully, my assured victory becomes worthless. For when I prove Kieran Kintree must assume Simon Unkler's responsibilities, it will turn him into a defendant for theft rather than the luckiest man in the land beyond." The judge asked, "If your premise holds, Advocate, wouldn't this alleged theft be among those responsibilities to inherit?" If the jury must judge based on all of Unkler's life, yes, Your Honor. However, that is beyond what we seek to prove. We contend the defendant should only assume the responsibilities his actions allowed Unkler to avoid. I am unaware that the vineyards lodged complaints or sought Unkler's capture before the Duchess's actions triggered this trial. Since Unkler faced no threat from the Isabellas before his escape, this is not a responsibility Kieran helped him dodge. Isabella replied, "We only discovered the theft 2 days ago, when our wagons returned from Angerie. That further supports my point. This is all tenuous, frivolous, nearly preposterous," Advocate Del Veris, Judge Blackhall said. "It's as if you want to have your suckling piglet and eat it too. Some may say that, Your Honor. But on one hand I argue for a blessing, on the other, for its loss," Del Veris replied. "Nay, my father might call it punishment if we captured the real Simon Unkler, but we seek compensation, likely in labor, from this pretend Simon Unkler you propose." The Duchess leaned close to whisper in her attorney's ear. He said, "We could offer that compensation, Solicitor Isabella. If only it were that simple, Advocate. But would that stop future thieves? Then I remain with my conundrum. Your Honor, my worthy colleague raises a valid point, Isabella said. One I expected him to identify. That's why I propose an alternative solution. We're listening. Yes, we are listening, Adrian said, wary that the antagonism might dissolve into cooperation. If you've heard the Fairs Crier, you know the everlong summer wine jamboree begins in 4 days. As tradition, our vineyard sponsors the opening night. An amazing evening is planned, but we can make it better. I propose that instead of continuing this trial here, we postpone it until then. If the Duchy of Were wins, the most beautiful Duchess will have her husband. Otherwise, the defendant is freed. The victor will be decided by a jury pool drawn from all here, Were, or anywhere. That night, we will hold a trial by water. That's barbaric, Adrian protested. Del Verus agreed. Your Honor, I believe enough time has been wasted. Now, councillors, don't be hasty. Let's hear the solicitor out, the judge said. Thank you, Your Honor. Gaston, if you would. Hold it up. Boy, it won't bite. The youth reached into his pouch and pulled out a bundle of white cloth. Embarrassed, he dropped the pouch and held the cloth before him. It was a thin cotton shift, embroidered with the symbol of the vineyards of Xavier Isabella. My apologies for the rough draft. When the time comes, I'm confident seamstress Thorne will craft something far better for the trial. A trial held at the stroke of midnight, where plaintiff and defendant, both clad in their special shifts, will stand before the jury of the masses. Then we will drench each in water and judge worthiness by the volume of applause when I hold my hand above each head. Since Maud's wardrobe changes, one particular part of Kieran's current form occupied the forefront of his thoughts and the edge of his vision. Coupled with a memory of how a rainstorm dramatically altered the drape of his white robe, he glanced downward and then sideways at the Duchess, whose expression held confusion as he made a mental comparison. Embarrassing if caught, but another made the same connection and broke the tension. Woo-hoo, a trial by water, water, water. Ack. The cry, combined with the sound of a chair crashing, came from the bailiff racing between the two tables, mallets in hand. The judge warned you, Fergus, Brom growled. I forgot, Brom. Honest. Ignoring protests, Fergus fled the courtroom with the bailiff close behind. At that moment, the Duchess fully grasped what the solicitor proposed, her gaze mirroring Kieran's a moment before. I won't do it. Of course not, milady. Solicitor Isabella, how could you suggest something so beneath the Duchess's dignity? We would allow a champion to stand in your place, Duchess. Though your knack for finding someone worthier than yourself truly baffles me. Caught between indignation and flattered appreciation, the Duchess fell silent. Kieran added, I won't do it either. I told you as much, Solicitor Isabella. Now present my proposal. You're as sharp as ever, Judge Blackhall. But I doubt they'll consent to a trial by combat. And that entails? Del Verus asked, bracing for the answer. The judge replied with excitement, I was thinking the Isabellas could supply one of their grape-crushing tubs, fill it with grapes, and have the plaintiff and defendant battle inside. The first to pin their opponent twice wins. Seeing the looks of disbelief from both tables, he quipped, You're going to make me endure the rest of this trial, aren't you? How about a trial by fire? See who can dance around a bonfire the longest. No. Damn it, I wanted to go fishing this afternoon. Isabella responded, It seems we may need to revisit your earlier offer, Duchess. Shall we meet at lunch to negotiate? Instead of replying, she asked, Do you always dress so attractively, Solicitor Isabella? Alas, no. Only for the most important occasions, court, patronage of the arts, and seduction. Matching his smoky gaze, she said, I very much look forward to lunch. Offering an extravagant bow, Isabella motioned for Gaston to precede him and strode from the room, an extra swagger in his step should his lunch date be watching. They were. A quack and a knob. Standing to call his next witness, Del Verus cocked his head toward an open window, hearing a faint cry of stop chasing me, and asked, Do we wait for your bailiff to return before continuing? A red-eyed glare swept the room as the judge said, "Only if anyone doubts I can handle things." "No. Carry on, advocate." "Your Honor, I call Dr. Arno Horshark to the stand." Of all Kieran's encounters since arriving in the land beyond, Dr. Horshark was not the strangest. Yet when Kieran met him 3 afternoons earlier, at the plaintiff's behest, he left more confused. The doctor asked a series of seemingly random questions, barely connected. The scrawny man with a shock of curly hair took the stand and swore to tell the truth. Dr. Horshark is here to provide his expert opinion on the defendant's true desires in this case. Doctor, could you please explain your qualifications? Certainly, Advocate Del Veris. I apprenticed under the renowned Dr. Anati D. Corter at Steerford University, where I earned my doctorate in skullduggery. I went to Steerford as well. I am well aware, Your Honor. I was there when you led our boys to 3 straight victories over the University of Grantebridge in the annual hide-and-seek contest. Those were the days. They were indeed, Your Honor. After graduation, I taught there for several years while developing the Horshark test. The what test, Doctor? Judge Blackhall asked. It's a method allowing a skilled practitioner to evaluate how a subject's mind works. The subject views specific images, and their responses, words, reaction time, and other factors are interpreted. Kieran recalled the test as more confusing than the questions. Each time the doctor showed a shadow puppet on the wall, Kieran said the animal's name. Yet the doctor mumbled phrases like "how interesting" and "that's a surprise," as if he'd uncovered life secrets. Kieran fought hard not to strangle the man before the meeting ended. So, with this test, can you determine whether someone is crazy? Please, Your Honor, we in the profession prefer the term balmy. However, the goal of my test is not to label madness, but to understand how a person perceives reality and thinks. Unable to conceal his skepticism, Judge Blackhall asked, "Really? Numerous studies have confirmed this, Your Honor. Many seek my expertise, notably King Lawrence of the See of NN, who frequently calls on me to assess those who bring him their troubles." King Lawrence, the judge said, his voice tinged with admiration. "They say he has his finger on the world's pulse." "I do not doubt it, Your Honor." "Well, if you're good enough for King Lawrence, you're good enough for us. Proceed with your questions, advocate." The next 2 hours of questions from Advocate Del Veris, and the lengthy answers from Dr. Horshark, proved more numbing than trying to count one's eyelashes without a mirror. The judge spent much of the time polishing his warhammer. The Duchess, still distracted from Solicitor Isabella's visit, did not resume her flirtations from the previous day. Without competition, Kieran saw no need to counterflirt, instead trying to ignore the jurors, who seemed overly interested in the cut of his bodice. The only interruption came when a triumphant yet disheartened Brom returned, holding broken pieces of his mallet in each hand. Finally, Del Veris asked a question that refocused everyone's attention. "Doctor, between the form the defendant currently inhabits and that of Simon Unkler, which would he prefer? Despite appearances, the defendant's spirit and inclinations are male. With effort, he may continue as he is now, but he would be happier as Simon Unkler. And what would be the defendant's thoughts on marrying the Duchess? He would worry he's not good enough for her, though it would be a dream come true. So it would be a positive for the defendant. That is my clinical opinion. Thank you, Dr. Horshark. No further questions, Your Honor. Barrister Wren, your witness," said Judge Blackhall. "Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Horshark, you say my client can cope as he is. How long before he goes balmy? I won't say unequivocally that he will lose his mind, even if he remains as is. He is steadfast, almost plodding by nature, which acts as a buffer. However, I expect mental cracks to develop if he stays in this form. How soon before those cracks? I cannot say for certain. 2 weeks? No, not that soon. 4 weeks? Still unlikely. Well, my client will be restored to his natural form within 4 weeks, Adrian said. Between Simon Unkler's form and his own, which would he prefer? The doctor hesitated, then answered, his own. Thank you, Dr. Horshark. No further questions, Your Honor. Advocate Del Veris, do you have additional questions? Will they be less boring than before? I believe so, Your Honor. Shaking his head, the judge said, wrong answer, Advocate. Had you said, no, Your Honor, I would have allowed them. Since you didn't, Dr. Horshark, you may step down. Advocate, call your next witness. Your Honor, I call Sood Bui to the stand. When Adrian showed Kieran the plaintiff's potential jurors, this name jumped out. Someone he'd known since boyhood in Kintree, though never as a friend. Truth be told, Bui made no friends. Despite advantages over Kieran, wealthy by Kintree standards, inheriting his parents' dark good looks, and never having to work, he never learned their common sense or humility. Arrogant, whiny, conniving, deceitful, and paranoid, Sood could have served as the higher puzzle to the god of knobs. Bui's true value was revealed when the village selected the disposable 20 for their Levi, and he was numbered among them, despite his parents' ability to prevent it. The result? More bitterness added to his long list of faults. Though he found a place, it wasn't on the shield wall where trust was key. Nobody trusted Sood even in the latrine line. Still, he proved a natural baker, and the baker's hours kept him away from most people. Like Kieran, Bui received an offer from the Beige Baron after the Battle of Muddy Creek, where he fell under the command of Sergeant Simon Unkler, who manipulated him effortlessly. Under Unkler's command, Bui's greatest success came during a campaign in Brevia. Cut off from their allies by a large enemy force, most settled in for their final night's rest. But Bui sneaked into the enemy camp and spiked their flour barrels with a concoction of his own making. Not lethal, the Baron would never permit that, but enough to give the enemy soldiers, who ate biscuits for breakfast, severe digestive distress. Debilitated, they couldn't stop the regiment's breakout nor keep pace with their march. For a time, Bui was the regiment's hero, the biscuit artist, not merely the baker named Sood. But that glory didn't last. When some men in the regiment showed signs of deshal use, the Baron assigned Lieutenant Finkel to investigate. Many suspected the trail would lead to Sergeant Unkler, but when Finkel raided a back room in a nearby inn, all they found was an open window. Because of his size, Kieran accompanied the lieutenant and was the first to reach the window, spotting a group of men fleeing, one resembling Bui. However, in the darkness, he couldn't be certain, nor did the Baron press him, satisfied that the raid had scared the drug ring off. When Bui heard Kieran's accusation, he never forgot it. The mild disdain he'd always harbored for his fellow Kintree outcast twisted into pure hatred. It was no surprise he sought a role in Kieran's downfall. Time seemed to have favored Bui since the regiment disbanded. Taking the stand, he appeared a prosperous merchant, but his expression, a mix of sneer and leer, perfectly captured Sood Bui's nature as he stared down his feminized adversary. Kieran, in response, neither wilted nor blushed. He restrained himself from puffing out his chest, knowing it would seem less combative than before. Instead, he stared back, his face unconsciously adopting the contemptuous look only pretty girls could muster. Del Veris addressed the court, Your Honor, Master Bui is the court apothecary in Angaree. However, he knew both Kieran Kintree and Simon Unkler before they came to the land beyond. Can you tell us where you met them, Master Bui? Internal note. Skip the initial part of Bui's questioning, it just repeats well-known narrative. Master Bui, were Kieran Kintree and Simon Unkler close? Del Veris asked. Not exactly friends. Sergeant Unkler kept everyone at arm's length, but he trusted a select few. Kintree was among them. In what way? Whenever the sergeant went on a mission, he took Kintree's squad for protection. They knew more about Unkler's secrets than anyone, but never spoke or reacted to rumors. They were afraid of Kintree. What rumors? Too many to recall. One about a countess, another about a deshal problem in the regiment. Most suspected Unkler was behind it, but when they tried to catch him, he slipped away. People whispered Kintree warned him about the raid, probably to deflect blame from himself. That's slander, Adrian interrupted. Agreed, barrister. Jury, try to forget that statement, the judge added. One more question, Master Bway, Del Veris continued. Would Kieran Kintree put himself in danger for Simon Unkler? Kintree took an arrow for Unkler during the pestle campaign. Remembering that incident differently, Kieran watched as Adrian stood to cross-examine. Master Bway, did you serve under Sergeant Unkler? Yes, but as a baker, my hours were earlier than his. We dealt with him through corporals like Kintree. Was my client under the quartermaster's command? Not most of the time. When did you last see Simon Unkler? When the regiment disbanded. You didn't see him during his stay in Angaree? No, I worked late nights during mandrake harvest. Didn't you want to visit an old comrade? I didn't know he was in town. You didn't know he courted the duchess? Don't you live at the palace? Adrian asked, incredulous. I do. I heard about the courtship, but never his name, only some lord. Duke Plicity? Bway scowled. Never heard of him. I find that hard to believe. Did you live like a hermit and talk to no one? Surely the courtship was common gossip. Your Honor, Barrister Wren is badgering the witness, Del Veris protested. The judge quipped, I have a pet badger who's sad we can't go fishing this afternoon. Move on, Barrister Wren. Yes, Your Honor. Master Bway, when did you first hear of Duke Plicity? Probably at the palace, Bway answered, sweating slightly. Didn't you hear Sergeant Unkler use that name around the campfire? No. Do you remember Marquis de Seption? No. So my client is mistaken to say you and Unkler created Duke Plicity and Marquis de Seption to entertain comrades? Nervously glancing between the plaintiff's table and the judge's warhammer, on which he swore to tell the truth, Bway replied, Kintree is wrong. Wouldn't an honorable employee inform their employer if they knew she was being duped? That's leading and speculative, Your Honor, Del Veris objected. I retract the question. No further questions. Judge Blackhall asked, any more questions, advocate? Bway, glaring, said, no, Your Honor. More witnesses? No, Your Honor. The plaintiff rests. Excellent. Lunch break, then. Be back by 2 bells. Grand finale. After the judge left, Brom escorted the jury out while Kieran's admirers, now bored out of their minds, dispersed. None of the were faction moved, though. They watched their duchess and her advocate speak quietly. Eventually, the two stood and shot angry looks at Bway, who lingered at the stand as if it offered protection. It didn't. When the duchess departed, the advocate beckoned imperiously to the apothecary before following. Their side of the room emptied after them. Am I imagining it, or was Bway a terrible witness? Kieran asked. Terribly bad, Adrian agreed. He'd only be worse if he tattooed liar on his forehead. I can't believe Del Veris didn't prep him better. Bway's irrational confidence makes him believe he alone knows what's going on. He forgets others can foil his plans. It's not in his nature to think he'd be caught. If Del Veris didn't know that, I understand why he thought Bway was a good witness. He's not the first to learn the problem with trusting that dolt. Well, I'll tell you this, the only person who enjoyed Bway's testimony more than us was Dr. Horshark. His own testimony was lukewarm at best for either side, but compared to Bway's, it was exactly what Del Veris wanted to hear. Kieran asked, it was a good morning, wasn't it? Yes. Maud added, the Duchess's interest seemed to fade as well. Understandable now that she knows Unkler is a con man. So, Adrian, how do you plan to proceed with the defense? I intend to call you first, Maud. I want to show that Kieran and Unkler's meeting was accidental, which should be clear once you outline your travels. Will you be questioning me? Kieran asked. I'm torn on that. Before today, I would have said yes. In a he said, she said case, only your voice is available, not Unkler's. That's a strength we can use. But now I'm wondering if we need much of a defense at all. Keeping Bway's poor performance fresh in the jury's mind might be our best bet. Let's adjourn for lunch, and I'll think more on it. Any preferences? I could go for some maple pecan ice cream. I know just the place. First, let me put on my cape. Fueled by a sugar rush from sweets, Kieran paced the nearly empty courtroom with Maud and Adrian. Soon, a small group of his admirers arrived, and his extra energy made him gush thanks. Luckily, the two orcs appeared before he embarrassed himself too much. Yet, even when the second bell rang and the jury took their seats, neither the Duchess nor her advocate, nor any of their supporters, showed up. Brom moved to the window, whispered to Jennifer, and knocked on the judge's chamber door. A scowling ogre appeared, his red eyes fixed on the main door. No one spoke, wary of stirring the judge's simmering temper. Finally, the man who did enter was Advocate Del Verus. "You're late, Advocate. My apologies, Your Honor. Will your client be joining us?" "No, Your Honor. She's still at lunch with Solicitor Isabella." "You're lucky, Advocate. I nearly ruled in favor of the defendant while you were gone. We wouldn't have protested if you did, Your Honor." "What?" "Her Grace, Duchess Morgana of Wur, has asked me to inform you that we no longer seek the extradition of Kieran Kintree." "I'm going fishing," Judge Blackhall exclaimed, pumping his fist. Kieran's supporters broke into song. "Ding dong. The fairy's free." "Which fairy?" "The shop fairy." "Ding dong. The shop fairy is free." "Shout it loud and clear, plug your ears, get out of here." "Shout it, the shop fairy is free. She's gone where the seamstresses go." "Hello, hello, hello. Yo-ho, let's open shop and sell all the clothing out." "Ding dong. The merry-o, sing it high, sing it low. Let them know. The shop fairy is free." Judge Blackhall rapped his battle hammer and sang. "As Justice of the Fairtown Court, in this county in the land beyond, I set her free most regally." Barrister Adrian stood and sang, "But we've got to verify it legally, to see." Judge Blackhall prompted, "To see? If she is morally, ethically." Brom the bailiff marched forward, singing, "Spiritually, physically." Jennifer the clerk joined, "Positively, absolutely." Kieran's supporters and the jury, holding on to each other like in a musical, sang, "Undeniably and reliably free." Finally, Advocate Del Verus rose and declared, "As were counsel I will aver, I thoroughly exonerate her. And she's not only merely free, she's really most sincerely free." Judge Blackhall rapped his hammer and sang, "Then this is a day of independence for the shop fairy and all her descendants." Barrister Adrian muttered, "If any." Judge Blackhall announced, "Yes, let the joyous news spread, the super-hot shop fairy is free." All but Kieran, Maud, Adrian, and Del Verus danced out of the courtroom, repeating, "Ding dong. The fairy's free." "Which fairy?" "The shop fairy." Mouth agape, Kieran asked, "What just happened?" "Seamstress Thorne, Solicitor Isabella told me to prepare you to work on 2 wedding dresses when you visit," Del Verus said. It took Kieran a moment to grasp the meaning. "What about her worspiderness?" "Ah, I wondered why you resisted what seemed so tempting. Doubtless you've heard rumors about the Duchess's parents. Let me just say, Isabella's family is too powerful to anger. And me? Would I have had anything to fear?" Del Verus smiled but didn't answer as he left the room. "I think I made a huge mistake, Maud." "Nonsense, Kieran. I can't see you as some rich woman's kept man." "I can. I've seen it many times in my dreams. Besides, you wouldn't want to leave me before our journey is complete, would you?" You, I guess not." "I knew it," Maud said, grabbing his arm in a hug. "Now let's head to the seamstress tent, we've got a sale to run." "I think I'll head back to my room instead." "That won't pay for Adrian's services." "What? You can't expect him to work for free. But you made a decent commission last night, so that'll help. Can I change back into the outfit I wore yesterday? If you think you can sell as much as you did then. We only have 3 days left here, and Adrian didn't come cheap." "Crap. Okay, let's go. That's the spirit, my pretty shop fairy." If you appreciated this story and wish to show your support, don't forget to join me on Patreon for exclusive content.